So as I said, you've been with us as a book club member for quite some time, but I'd love it if you took a few moments to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started writing.
I have always thought of myself as a writer, and people always called me a writer.
Mhm.
It took me a long time to actually get the writing process going. Prue Warren is here tonight. She's a very dear friend, and she and I, when the pandemic started, I had written before, and I had never really done anything. It had just been, I had treated it always sort of as a hobby.
Oh, okay.
When the pandemic started, I had I was so frustrated by not being able to do anything to contribute, to help out. I would stand and I would watch the news and see people, working in soup kitchens or doing all kinds of things. And one night I actually watched, and there was a story on the local news about a 14-year-old boy who was creating woodwork designs and donating all the money that he made from these designs to food kitchens. And I thought to myself, I have to do something. What can I do? And I wasn't comfortable going out in public. I said, well, I can write. So I put out a call to my writer friends. I said, anybody want to join me in putting out an anthology? And Prue joined, and along with 3 other writers. And we within 2 months, we put out an anthology called Love Gone Viral. And we donated all the money to World Central Kitchen and Feeding America. And it was really the first time that I had actually done it. It's just, I have to do it. I'm going to do it. And I knew nothing about self-publishing, really nothing about anything except, how to put sentences together and so forth. But we did it, and we raised a fair amount of money, and it was a lot of fun. And after I did that, I was like, well, okay, it's not that horrible. I could do it, so I could take my other work and actually do something with it. So.
That's so cool. I had no idea that it took the pandemic to kind of just give you that sort of kick in the pants to make your dream come true.
Yeah, it was really neat. And plus I had been working full time. I mean, I've been working full time for years, but I was in an odd position in that I was a full-time substitute at a school that I worked at for 16 years. And so when I say substitute, I very often had year-long assignments. So I was essentially faculty, but when the pandemic hit, I was unemployed. So it was the first time in forever. So I also had time on my hands, which I hadn't had before.
Yeah. So leading up to that, though, because the way that the story comes off, it feels very overnight, but you had to be writing and practicing and getting that craft just right. What was it about how you figured out like where your voice sort of landed and fit? Because I do love about your backlist is that you have kind of touched so many different genres at this point, too.
I can't write unless I have a story that comes to me. And so I have had various stories over the years. So before I had finished Second Sight before the pandemic started, but again, I hadn't done anything with it.
Yeah, I was just waiting.
Yeah, and I had started Second Act, which is a ballet murder mystery. Second Sight is kind of a reincarnation mystery. But it took the pandemic to the kick in the pants to say, okay, you can do it. It's not all that terribly hard. So
Yeah.
and it also just, I've been working with other writers for years, but again, the close coordination we did, and I also joined a writers group that was started by another friend. We meet every single morning, 7 days a week. It's not obligatory, but we have a Zoom link that's open 7 days a week that we get on, and we write together, and we just catch up on each other's progress and stuff. And that was an incentive as well. So.
Absolutely. That accountability, having accountability buds makes it so much easier and more fun too.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the process of making Love Gone Viral and working, having to put all of this together while you're also learning how to do it?
Well, we gave ourselves, I think 8 weeks to get the stories done. We said they could be like between 5,000 and 15,000 words. We were very liberal. We were a very disparate group. We did not know each other. I had never met Prue. There was one other author, Meredith Bond, whom I had met a few times, but we didn't know each other well. And then there were 2 essentially strangers that just, and we communicated only by Zoom. And so we set a hard deadline. You know, the stories have to be in by June 15th. No, June 15th of 2020. So that wasn't that
Wild.
long. You know,
No.
the world closed down on March 13th, and our deadline was the end of June, and then we published on July 15th. So it
Incredible.
was remarkably fast. And we had volunteer editors, and Meredith Bond she knew formatting. So she did the formatting, and it was just an intense, quick project that we were all very committed to. So
I love that. Had you always been a big reader?
always, always. I still think of myself as a reader first, and I only write a book that I can really enjoy reading.
Hmm.
And I mean, that I can really think, like when I'm editing, sometimes I'm involved in the story. And even though I know what happens, I'm reading it to find out what happens. So
I love that. What was the first book that you remember loving?
oh God, I don't know. I really have no idea. I was always reading. I loved, I read the Bobbsey twins, and then I moved on to Nancy Drew, and then I probably went straight to Danielle Steele after that. I don't know. So,
What is it about reading that brings you such passion and love and keeps bringing you back?
I don't know. I don't know if it's the immersion into story. We talk about this every week. I don't watch a lot of television. So I think it's something beyond story, because there are fantastic stories out there on television, certainly, but I just love being immersed in a book. I love getting to know the characters. And I find I always put myself in the perspective of, would I do this? Does this, I love learning from books. Sometimes I don't know what I was reading the other day. It was a book I tossed out. I was like, because I've lost patience. I don't finish a book if I don't like it anymore. I feel like I'm too old. I don't have enough time left on this.
Absolutely. Yeah, agreed.
But so one book I did not finish, I can't remember what I learned. It was some little tidbit. I was like, wow, I didn't know that. And it was like, I'm really glad I learned that. So I'm listening to a book right now that it's not like the normal type of thing I normally read. It's called Afterlives by Abdul Razak Gurna, and he won a Nobel Prize. And it's an incredible book. It's about East Africa at the beginning of the 20th century. And I knew so little about that, about the colonial powers all fighting over this territory, and stuff that went on before World War I and during World War I and after. And it's just like amazing. It's a great story that, like, I'm very intrigued as to what he's doing with it, because it's but I've learned so much from it, and I love that. I love it when I can learn from a book.
Absolutely. Well, and that's a great segue into researching books too, having the broad spectrum of genres that you've touched. And I'm sure you've got more historicals in the back burner and maybe even some fantasies. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach research and how you motivate yourself once, you realize, like, okay, now I've actually got to write the book?
Well, it's often simultaneous for me. Second Sight is a book that takes place in two time periods. It takes place in Revolutionary America and contemporary Virginia. And in Revolutionary America, it's in Tarrytown, New York, which is a town I would drive through when I went to my sister's. And we passed this church, which is one of the oldest extant church, I think, in the United States. And I would look at it. And then, when the story came to me, like my husband and I, we stopped one day, we went all through the graveyard, and then we went to the Historical Society, and we were talking to people, and it was fascinating. And then doing the research for that, I learned things I never knew before. There's one scene in that book that talks about the fortress, that's not the word I want, in Saratoga in New York. And if it had been, the British did a very poor job of defending it.
Mhm.
and it fell very quickly. And from what I learned from my research, had it been better defended, better staffed, the whole war might have turned out differently. It was just this crazy thing that I had never even heard of that I learned in the research. I love that so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Because those are, then I would want to be like, okay, I'm going to look up all of these other things on
Right,
Wikipedia or get all the books from the
right,
library,
right, right,
yeah.
right, right. Yeah, and the one book that's sort of I've been working in the background for a long time. It takes place in France just prior to the French Revolution. So yeah, I got a whole ton of books on that now that I've gone into, and I got really caught up in the history of Marie Antoinette for a while, things like that. So, but
That's so cool. Well, let's jump right into Second Stanza, which is your latest release. Can you talk a little bit about it and what inspired the book?
so Second Stanza is just a contemporary mystery of sorts. And crazily enough, it was inspired. I was reading a Washington Post article on Cat Stevens.
Oh,
And yeah,
I love them.
yeah, I was reading it online, and it had links, as online stories do. And I clicked on a link and I started listening to Cat Stevens' song Fathers and Sons.
Mm-hmm.
And just the whole book came to me. Like not the whole book,
Wow.
but this idea. Like,
Yeah.
and so that was the inspiration for this book. And if you read Second Stanza, it has nothing in common with Father and Son. It's the way it came to me.
Inspiration strikes, when you least expect it.
Yeah. So, but it's a book about a couple who fall completely in love when they're in college, and then the guy dies in an explosion, and the woman's heart is broken, and she has to go on, but her life is never quite the same. And then 10 years later, she's at a bar where there happens to be a mass shooting, and a guy saves her life, and she's convinced that it's her old boyfriend, which is not possible since he's dead.
Wow.
And then things happen that she starts to think, well, maybe it is him, but how could it possibly be him? So, and then it's the story of what she does from that point on. So,
Oh my gosh. Well, and I'm so curious, like how you unwind from, or how you can kind of put away the scariness or the intensities when you're writing so that you can kind of, unwind and just be regular Meg.
I've never really had a problem with that. I mean, I think
Mhm.
about my story when I'm not writing it, but I also, I don't know. I mean, I listen to books constantly. I have earbuds in my ears all the time, so I'm always immersed in story in one way or another,
Mhm.
whether it's my own or somebody else's. So,
Awesome. Well, so this is I find it very interesting that you've got 3 books in a row with the second in the title. And I'm curious what attracts you to Second Chances or Misses.
you know, I came into this business in a wing and a prayer, and I've gone to so many workshops. Again, long before I seriously thought about publishing, I belonged to RWA, Romance Writers of America, and I attended workshops. And there is so much out there about having to brand yourself and separate yourself from the rest of the crowd. And it just, these titles sort of made sense to me. I thought, well,
Mhm.
I might as well go with it because I kind of like it. And so far they've made sense. So,
Yeah.
um, I had one author friend tell me, get rid of the second, it's stupid. I was like,
No.
no, I kind of like it. So,
I was gonna say, don't fix what's broken if it's not broken, I think it looks great.
so,
Well, Meg, what can readers expect from you next?
well, right now I've been involved in several short story projects. I have a short story in an anthology, a Christmas anthology that came out recently called Christmas Kisses and New Year's Wishes, or I might have reversed that. Yeah, Christmas Wishes and New Year's Kisses.
There's kisses. There we go.
Yeah. That's out. It's only in digital format. I have a short story coming out in an anthology called Mrs. Right that's coming out for Valentine's Day. And that actually is a collection of stories about couples celebrating their first wedding anniversary. Actually,
Lovely.
my couple from Second Stanza is in that book. There's a short story in there about them, which I'm really happy with. And then I'm going to be in another anthology coming out in March called Love at Dawn, and that's being written by the writers that I write with every morning. And so 7 of us are getting together, and we're just, many of those writers have not been published before, and so we're just fitting together to put out our stories that we've written during our time together.
Oh
So,
my gosh, I love that. Have
yeah.
you guys ever thought about writing one big story together?
No, I don't know if we will, but I don't know if that would work, but it might be interesting.
Yeah, interesting. All right, well, we're going to jump now, Megan, to our fresh facts section, where we just kind of ask you the fun boilerplate questions, answer them however you feel. So the first one is, what is your favorite genre to read?
Well, obviously romance. Most any kind of romance. I like romantic comedy. I love romantic suspense. I love historical romance. So most types of romance. I'm not great on fantasy, but I have read some. So yeah.
What is one genre that you never want to read again?
I don't love literary fiction. I don't like authors who just spend their time trying to be clever.
Agreed. Absolutely.
There are a lot of them out there.
There are very many of them. What is your favorite time of day to write?
In the morning.
In the morning. And then what is your favorite time of day to read?
You know, if I had my druthers, I'd read 24/7. I really would.
Sounds lovely.
I have a story going everywhere, either in my ears or I have, the Kindle app on my phone. So if I get stuck waiting someplace, I have the Kindle app going. I generally only read a physical book at night when I'm in bed. So I end up reading slowly because I fall asleep fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
My husband had to go to an emergency eye doctor appointment yesterday, and I just grabbed a book, and it took him more than an hour, and I read so much, and I was so happy because it's like I've almost forgotten what it's like to sit and read a book because I only tend to do it at night when I'm sleeping, but it was wonderful.
You're like, this is delightful. Heaven.
Yeah, he came out feeling terrible about how long it had taken. I was like, no, go back.
Go back. You need 20 more minutes. It's fine.
It's fine.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much. What is one new hobby or practice that you've picked up recently?
I don't know that there's any, unfortunately.
I think getting an extended period of time of reading is what you got.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. Like
who was your first book boyfriend or girlfriend?
Gwen, I was terribly afraid you were going to ask me this
I'm
question.
going to ask these questions to you.
I couldn't think of one. And I was actually thinking, we lived with my grandmother when I was young, and I used to watch old movies together with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I fell in love with Laurence Olivier as Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights. But then when I actually hated the book when I finally got around to reading it. I think I'm the first person, I read Nancy Drew, and I really thought that the relationship between Nancy and Ned got short shifted. And I was really, I was in it to have more, more romance. So I don't know what, I've always been interested in romance and relationships. So
yeah, I love it. Same. What is your favorite writing fuel?
Tea, black tea with a little
Black
milk.
tea. Do you, you just said black tea. I was gonna say, do you like herbal? But you just answered the question for me. So I don't even need to ask that. What is one luxury item that you can't live without?
Probably tea. I have far too many mugs because I'm always buying new mugs because I love different mugs for my tea. I'm always looking for the perfect, very large mug.
Do you have, I was gonna ask, do you have a specific type of mug that your platonic ideal of a perfect mug?
One I broke several years ago and haven't been able to replace, right?
Exactly.
A large one.
I know that mug.
Yeah, right, you have one just like it, right?
Yeah. So what are some romances that inspire you? And it can be across the board.
There are so many fantastic authors out there that just write. I read just 2 weeks ago or so, I read, oh no, I'm not gonna find, Nora Goes Off Script,
Mhm.
which is new, by Annabelle Monaghan. It was so fantastic. I was like, and I did not see how like there's a twist to it, which I did not see. And I kept thinking to myself, how is there going to be a happy ending of this? And I never remember how books get in my queue, like who recommended it, why. I was thinking,
Yeah.
even if this is women's fiction, maybe it doesn't have a happy ending, because I just could not see where it was going, how she was going to pull it off. And it was so wonderful. And I'm just constantly, there are so many great books out there and great authors. And um, I like Lessons in Chemistry, which came out this year, was so fantastic. Remarkably Bright Creatures, about the octopus in the aquarium in Seattle, which was just phenomenal, mind-blowingly fantastic. That it's wonderful. And then there, old authors that you you can trust, and they come out with a book and you love it. Like I don't know. There's so many.
Yeah, there are so many.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm like, oh, I want to go read right now.
Right. So,
How do you celebrate a new release?
I just carry on.
Meg, you've got to celebrate.
Yeah, I know, but when you're doing it indie, it kind of it's a little bit different. You just you sort of celebrate by watching your sales numbers and hope they go up a little bit, which is not really all that encouraging sometimes. But like this book, Second Stanza, came out, I think October 4th is staying in my mind for some reason, but like other things were going on that day. So it's sort of like, okay, I hope it does okay, but we're moving on. And then I did a lot of, I laughed a lot last year. Second Act, which is my ballet murder mystery, which is really a lot of fun, came out the same day as Barack Obama's book. And I laughed, like, his book sold 17 million copies and mine sold 17. So it's like, it's almost the same, just a couple of zeros different,
Yeah, it's just a couple of commas. It's fine.
Right, a couple of place points. Yeah.
Just a rounding error. It's a good person to celebrate your book birthday with, though.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what is some advice that you would give to your younger self?
Probably to dive in faster. I mean, because I have a lot of novels that I started and never finished. So to actually stick with it and not to be afraid that it would be something I could actually pull off.
Absolutely. Yeah, because look at you now. Are you a pantser or are you a plotter?
Probably a plantser,
A plantser.
Yeah, somewhere in between. I definitely don't outline, but I generally have an idea of where the whole. I sort of have a framework for the whole book, but then the inner workings sometimes they surprise me and they sort of take a path of their own. But
yeah, that makes sense. If you could be, or who is a dream writer collab that you would like to work with?
I don't know. Prue and I have worked well together. We haven't written a story together, but she's a lot of fun. And she writes romantic comedies, so her books are always light and funny and fun. I mean, dream-wise, okay, Susan Elizabeth Phillips and we can write a novel together.
Yeah, that's right. Put it out there.
Right. Several years ago, I wrote in an elevator with her at an RWA conference. I'm in an elevator with Susan Elizabeth. So incredible.
They're like, just give me some of your energy, please.
We could do that. We could write a novel together, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Be an exceptional reason to go to Chicago too. What is one motto that you live by?
Probably try to be kind.
I like that. What is the best book that you've read recently?
Oh, well, God, that's hard. I mean, recently, it was probably Nora Off Script, just in the last couple of weeks. And then some of the other books I was mentioning, Remarkably Bright Creatures, which is definitely not a romance, was wonderful. Lessons in Chemistry was wonderful. those are what come to mind most easily.
Those are good picks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Well, before I turn this over to our readers to ask you some follow-up questions, I'd love for you to answer our bonus question, which was, if you were to be haunted by somebody, who would you want to haunt you?
Well, I like somebody with Rochelle, I think, or someone before Rochelle was putting about wanting to be haunted by their pups from their previous pups. And we had this a brother and sister cat set that were really wonderful, that lived with us for 18 years and were really magnificent. And we have 2 cats now who are very nice. But
Mhm.
it's not quite the same, and I miss my old ones so much. They were French cats, and they were very, the female cat was definitely a reincarnated French woman, and she was very concerned about her weight, and she would
Mhm.
she was just very elegant, and the boy cat was just so lovable. His name was Fred, and we called him Freddie Bear, and he was
Aw.
he was so I had never thought of that until somebody put it in the comments, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to have Fred and Ethel back. But
Yeah, perfect.
as Sarah was saying, my grandmother, I think, comes and helps take care of me every once in a while. She's been dead for, I can't even think how many years, but I think she looks out for me once in a while, and I'm very appreciative of that.
Mhm. Oh, I love that. Awesome. Well, Meg, how can readers stay in touch with you and find out more about you?
Things I should have looked up, right? Website is
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Yeah, Meg Napier. Yeah, I thought, okay. Megnapier.com. I'm on Facebook as either Meg Napier or Meg Napier author, and the same on Twitter and Instagram, some variation of Meg Napier or author Meg Napier, or something like that, which I should have looked up beforehand and didn't. So yeah, that's where I am. I'm not on Pinterest. I'm not on, what's the other one everyone's supposed to be? TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. I don't see myself ever getting on TikTok.
That's okay. You don't need to. It's fine.
Okay.
I think the new social media is no social media. I don't know. Everything's falling apart now. Well, Meg Napier, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This was such a pleasure, and I'm thrilled that you're going to take a couple of extra minutes to take questions from our readers.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everybody.